Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today on what is perhaps your lunch break if you're joining us on the east coast of Australia. I'd like to begin by acknowledging, honouring and respecting traditional custodians of the lands upon which we're all joining from. For Ali, Caitlin and I, that's the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge the profound and continuous passing on of wisdom and knowledge of the first peoples of these nations. And we acknowledge the systemic efforts that have attempted and failed to break this chain of wisdom and knowledge. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and we extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Indigenous sovereignty was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And we welcome people with lived and living experiences of neurodivergence who are joining us today. This recognition extends to the clinical and non-clinical workforces that support people with lived experience. So welcome, friends. Today, this is a safe space. You're not going to see something perfect. It won't be representative of every point of best practice that exists, and that's not really why we're here today. We're here to share our own perspectives of lived experience of neurodiversity. Our perspective is something that you can add to, you can integrate it with your own understanding, and you can question it where necessary as well. We'd welcome some discourse in the chat as needed. As long as you learn something, we're happy today. So just to help you ease into this room with us and understand how it's all going to work in this virtual room that we're all joining together today, we're going to be practicing a little of what we preach, and we're going to recognize that people absorb and interact information in different ways. So you'll see that there's a link that will be shared to the chat shortly, where we're basically sharing you a more expanded PDF version of the presentation we're giving today. And the presentation we're giving today is deliberately with a fewer number of slides, just so you can ease into the content and not have to absorb too much text on the screen all at once. We're also going to be providing a recording following the conclusion of the webinar, which will include links to these resources. And we're going to have some moments for interaction with you today as well. So there's a few things to know about that. You can use the chat option in Zoom here in the webinar for any general reflection or discourse about the topics that we're sharing. If you have a question you want the panel to address, there's a specific Q&A functionality directly in the webinar tools here in Zoom, and we will have a specific moment towards the end of the presentation to have a look at the Q&A and answer some of your questions from, again, our own lived experience, not from any stance as experts or people who are trained in these fields. And we're going to have a few moments of audience participation throughout using a website called Slido. You don't have to do anything for that right now. When prompted, you'll see on-screen instructions to visit the site and provide the code listed. It'll allow you to join in, or something we're all quite used to these days. We've got a QR code that'll show, and if you've got your smartphone handy, you can scan the QR code and easily participate in the interaction from that point. So that's everything we wanted to do for the scene setting for today together. Welcome again. I'll move us on to begin our presentation. And here's the big idea. Today, we're going to be sharing some ideas, some provocations, some myths, and some myth busting, and conclude with some principles and advice. At the end of the day, it all comes back to this core point. Neurodiversity is a thing, is not new. It matters because it brings a diversity of thoughts, needs, and ideas to the table. When you have a diversity of thoughts, needs, and ideas at the table, you build more impactful and effective things. We need to get better at understanding, welcoming, and embracing neurodiversity in our workplaces. So, before we go any further, it'd be great to know how you're feeling joining us here today. So this is a prompt for your first Slido moment with us. You'll see on the next screen the ways to interact with it. I wanted to genuinely ask, how are you feeling today joining us in this forum? What's coming up for you already? What sort of vibes have you got coming into this session? What sort of a day have you had arriving here with us? We'd love to see some responses here in the Slido. So as I said before, you can use slido.com and punch in that code that you see on the screen, or you can simply scan the QR code with your smartphone in a way that we're all unfortunately quite used to these days. Quite a bit of curiosity coming through. That's great. Busy but excited to learn, feeling peppy, wanting validation, positive, excited, interested, energized. Nervous is okay. Seeing nervous there too. Tell you what, I think we are as well, Ellie and Caitlin. Excellent. Some really cool responses coming through there. And while they're coming through, I'll give you a sense of the outcomes that we had in mind from bringing this webinar together. So from our conversation with you today, you may learn something you didn't know before. You'll have myths and stigmas challenged and reframed. You'll learn things you can do to support neurodiversity and neurodivergent folks in your workplace, and you'll be empowered to start meaningful conversations. But before we get to those things, I'll take another moment to pause at these awesome responses. And we might share a little bit about us. Thanks for responding, and we'll come back to that again soon with Slido. So you might like to know a little bit more about who we are and why we're speaking with you on this topic.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm a junior developer by title and a designer by heart. I have ADHD and undiagnosed autism. Moving on to the next slide. This GIF is the perfect description of my mind when thinking about presenting this webinar. To me, my brain's like a bullet train with bicycle brakes. It can do amazing things, but if I'm not extremely careful, I'll go flying off the rails.
Thanks, Ellie. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin. I'm a senior producer here at Portable, and I'm working through a diagnosis of autism. This GIF seems to sum up perfectly how I felt about presenting this webinar. Once I have a new project or an idea, I'm all in with it. I throw all of my attention and energy into it to make sure it's as good as it can be. To me, being autistic is like my brain running on Mac OS while everyone else is on Windows. It's not necessarily better or worse, it's just different.
Thanks, Caitlin and Ellie. And hi, everyone. I'm Adam. I'm a design strategy lead here at Portable, which is a fancy way of saying that I constantly switch between these roles of coach, cheerleader, collaborator for our curious and passionate team of people who like to ask lots of questions and tell inspiring stories here at Portable. And I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD, the inattentive type. So when it came to thinking about putting this webinar together, this is the GIF that I think best represented my response to it. Anyone's a Parks and Recreation fan in the audience. And to me, having ADHD is like a superpower that can really help in the world, as long as I use it wisely and there's not too much kryptonite laying around to stop me in my tracks. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk about you and how you might feel joining us today, and to help you know that whatever that is, it's okay with us. It's okay if you're learning about some of these concepts for the first time today. You might know a little and even feel compelled to share as we go along in the chat. That's great. You might feel a whole range of emotions and responses as you learn things, and that's okay too. There are no wrong answers, silly questions, or strict terminologies to worry about today. We'd like you to embrace curiosity, and I saw that in the responses, which is great. And feel free to ask questions. You might ask something that someone else didn't quite feel confident enough to, and this is, again, a safe space to ask those questions. We can't promise we'll have an answer for everything, but we'll do our best to respond from our own perspective of our own unique lived experiences. And you might even recognize some of the things we talk about today in yourself or others you care about. That's normal, and that's okay too. Sharing some traits with neurodivergent folks doesn't necessarily mean that you have a condition that falls under the neurodiversity banner, but it also might. So curiosity and open-mindedness is key when you're approaching these conversations. And as you'll hear today, we're all just one big, rich spectrum that we're all still learning more about. So let's think a little bit more about why this all matters. Ellie.
Yeah, we'd love to know from you why you think neurodiversity matters. both in the workplace and in the world generally. So we've got another Slido slide. If we can get your thoughts popped in there, it's just the same link as before. So if you've still got that open, that's all good. If you haven't got it open yet, scan that QR code just like you're checking in.
I feel like these people have already seen our slideshow, Ali.
Yeah. Reading through these, I'm like, oh, wow, these people know everything. This is great.
Wow. What a lovely bunch of folks we have joining us.
Definitely do.
Cool. I might hand to you, Caitlin, as we stay on this and get some more responses flying in.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like everyone's already covered the things I'm about to say, so that's awesome. As you've all said, and as we've touched on, neurodiversity can bring new perspectives to problems and new ideas for solutions. Just like diversity is important in terms of gender, sexuality, and race, it's also important in terms of neurotypes. And as Adam said earlier, the more perspectives and the greater diversity that we have, the better outcomes that we'll end up with.
And perhaps most importantly, neurodiversity already exists here at Portable and in the broader industry of research, design, and technology that we operate within. You've already been interacting with neurodivergent folks or those in close relationships with neurodivergent folks, and you may not have even realized it. Now I'm going to share what we mean when we talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergence. I've got a quote here from the Harvard Business Review. Everyone, to some extent, is differently abled, an expression favored by many neurodiverse people, because we are all born different and raised differently. Our ways of thinking result from both our inherent machinery and the experiences that have programmed us. Neurodiversity is a different way of thinking, interacting with, and seeing the world. More specifically, it relates to variations within the brain that can affect sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other cognitive functions. It's impossible for an individual to be neurodiverse or diverse in general. Neurodiversity can refer to a group of people where some members are neurodivergent. An individual, therefore, can be neurodivergent or neurotypical. Neurotypical means being neurologically typical, which means an individual's experiences are within the typical or average range of human neurology. It's fair to say that at the moment, the world readily caters to neurotypical folks.
Thanks, Ali. So now that we've spoken a little bit about who we are, why neurodiversity matters, and some definitions of what we're talking about today, it's important to share what neurodiversity can actually look like, and importantly, what it doesn't look like. So let's start with what it doesn't look like. There are myths, stigmas, and falsehoods about how neurodivergent folks show up in the world. And we're going to blow apart some of these myths about as quickly as Mythbusters blew apart this house. So I want to acknowledge here that we're all learning as we go. Finding the right language in these conversations can be hard, and these next few slides are actually really important to form a foundation of language for us. There is debate around how the neurodiversity movement adequately recognizes disability or not, and how applicable the social model of disability can be to all neurodivergent individuals. We're talking about this in the myths section because, as you might have guessed, it's not just as simple as a black and white answer. So when it comes to this social model of disability, it's important to understand that the neurodiversity movement has its roots in that model. This is different to the traditional medical model of disability and the language used around that. So the social model sees it that disability happens because society and its structures aren't able to accommodate an individual's needs. This is rather than placing the emphasis on the individual having an inability to conform to society or the structure's default norms. The point here is that you don't need to be a certain type of normal to enjoy the range of human experience, and an impairment should not be a barrier to inclusion or access. Now, some critics see this as a way of glossing over the true impact of actually having an impairment, and there could be very good reasons to address an impairment directly to provide a better quality of life. But as I said at the start, it's not black and white, and this is all nuanced. Is this still an attempt to bring an individual closer to a certain type of normal? Some people may wonder that too. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there can be real challenges, pains, and struggles for neurodivergent people, as with people who experience any forms of disability. And some people may prefer to see it that society needs to shift to accommodate, which you'll hear quite a bit of language from us around today. And some people may see it that impairments need to be addressed, and sometimes it's both. And I think the most important thing to take away from this myth-busting slide is that, as in all things, it's best to let individuals speak to their own experience in a way that resonates best with them. For all of us, it can also be important to simply be aware of these nuances and of which stance we may be adopting when we talk about things like neurodivergence.
The next myth we're going to bust is that neurodiversity is just another word for autism, or that it only refers to autism, Asperger's, and ADHD. While it's true that the neurodiversity movement was initially kickstarted by autism advocates, there are a broad range of neurodivergent conditions, and all fall under the idea of neurodiversity. The term neurodiversity was originally coined by an autistic sociologist, but as time passed and more research has been undertaken, the neurodiversity movement has expanded. Neurodivergence is a broad spectrum with conditions like dyslexia, dyscalculia, epilepsy, hyperlexia, dyspraxia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and Tourette syndrome. The list really goes on. We now recognize that neurodiversity itself is the diversity of all brains and all minds. It's a big, wonderful, colorful world filled with many amazing people.
Just because neurodivergent folks may have different communication or working preferences, it doesn't mean we have a lack of ability in these. There's a myth that neurodivergent folks are best suited to a limited range of tasks or careers, usually at one extreme or the other. So at one end, you might hear about people with a career in physics, like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, or at the other end, some might say that neurodivergent folks can only handle simple menial jobs with no responsibility or depth. You can't be autistic. You speak to people and you socialize really well. This particular myth is my favorite because it's one I challenge personally. At first glance, most people see me as an outgoing, confident person, but this misconception is one of the biggest reasons I think that so many people with autism in particular are undiagnosed. It's a myth that is caused by a lack of understanding that autistic people are all different in their ability and they exist within a spectrum, which is exactly why it's called autism spectrum disorder. But in saying that, even the term spectrum is something that we're learning the limits of. I think we realize now that it's not a black and white spectrum along a linear path. It's more like a color wheel, and each individual is their own hex code. Some autistic people can speak and communicate verbally, and others can't. Some autistic people have higher IQs than other people, and some have IQ levels within the average range. There is a wide range of skills, abilities, and communication levels among people on the autism spectrum.
Another thing that's important to say is that there's no one way to look, behave, or display traits of neurodivergence. Every neurodivergent individual is just as unique as every neurotypical individual. We all have our different strengths and weaknesses. Some of our inherent preferences, behaviors, and quirks might be attributable to neurodivergence, and others might just be about how all of us as humans have diverse and unique ways of showing up in the world. And also, we need to understand that not only is it unfair to negate the experiences of someone you might label as high functioning, the very use of labels like high functioning and low functioning are limiting and steeped in assumptions. It's actually best to avoid both. Talk about people as people and not labels. But at the same time, we're not going to shy away from the strength that comes from identifying with a community, this neurodiversity community. To identify as neurodivergent is to be given a term to make sense of and associate with as we learn more about ourselves. And I believe that's powerful. So, we used to have a heading on this slide, from blowing myths to blowing minds. So now to the truths. Well, this could never be an exhaustive list. We thought it would be useful to share some of the realities of being neurodivergent. I wanted to read this quote for you as well from La Trobe University. So neurodivergence does not fall on a linear spectrum where people have either ADHD or Asperger's or autism. It is a rich, evolving, multi-layered tapestry, one which we are only beginning to understand and one which we may never fully comprehend. I don't know if that resonates with people, but I actually love that as a realization as opposed to feeling limited by it, because curiosity, again, is the key here. So, some truths for you. And when I say we in these conversations, I mean neurodivergent folks. We can bring lateral thinking, pattern recognition, and new perspectives to really important moments in conversations. Neurodivergent brains are known for being extremely good at certain things, such as pattern recognition, memory, lateral thinking, information processing, attention to detail, hyperfocus, mix of all these things. We make connections between seemingly unrelated things that other people might miss. And our influence can help you make things easier for all types of people. What's wrong with creating a world that's easier for everyone to exist in and interact with? There's really not any downside to that. And I think before I move on, it's important to say that we're also not othering neurotypical folks in this conversation. We're just raising the profile of neurodivergent folks and allowing them a seat at the table. I'll hand to Ali now.
Yeah, accommodating for neurodivergent folks doesn't only improve their quality of life, but it also improves the quality of life for everyone else around them, both directly and indirectly. As Adam mentioned earlier, there's nothing wrong with creating a world that's easier for everyone to exist in. There are many people who can benefit from inclusive design and accessibility for a range of reasons that they may or may not be aware of. It also may help someone to feel more comfortable in themselves and give them space to recognize and understand what they need as an individual.
How a neurodivergent person wants to manage, treat, or utilize their neurodivergence should be up to them. The goal is not to create conditions that allow neurodivergent folks to appear more neurotypical. The goal should be to create conditions that accommodate and empower neurodiversity in all of its forms. It's almost a competitive advantage. Like we've spoken about earlier, and as it is when we talk to folks with any manner of lived experience, we must give people agency to identify with, manage, treat, or utilize their neurodivergence in ways that they are comfortable with. And this is a universally applicable rule. If you're not sure what language people are most comfortable with speaking, ask them. If you're not sure what sort of activity or method of interaction to provide would make somebody comfortable, find out what's preferred. Try to move the world to be more accommodating rather than asking an individual to meet your world where it's already at. Now, neurodivergent people might see neurodiversity as a superpower, but the reality is we're living in a world that is set up and catering for neurotypical people. Sometimes this means that there are real challenges and struggles for neurodivergent people who may find it a barrier to interacting with the world. In fact, it's why there's a growing industry for devices, tools, and items to help neurodivergent people cope and exist in a world that can often seem too big, too challenging, too loud, or just too much for them. Fidget spinners, noise-cancelling headphones, weighted blankets, and therapy pods are becoming very popular and mainstream, but they're actually a valuable tool for neurodivergent people who might need a way to distract, calm themselves, or just hide from the world for a little bit.
Now, I've been seeing some reactions in the chat complimenting us on our GIF game, Caitlin and Ali, so we'll see if our meme game is also up to scratch. So while we're talking about challenges, friends, in general, we said we weren't going to shy away from things today. There are unique challenges that can be faced by neurodivergent folks in general and in ways that are specific to their condition. And as we've been saying, it's fair to say that much of the world currently caters to neurotypical ways of interacting by default. These can be things like how interpersonal communication is expected of folks, the speed at which discussions and decisions are facilitated, the means with which information is distributed, expectations around how that information might be absorbed or recalled by individuals, and the amount of distractions present in environments provided to people. In a general sense, most neurodivergent folks will experience challenges across these if being asked to meet neurotypical folks where they are. And personal sharing for you, there are definitely things about being neurodivergent that I feel can just suck sometimes. It's okay to say that. With my ADHD, my brain is incredibly good at convincing me that it's intently listening to the substance of the conversation that I think I'm listening to. It's not being so honest in letting me know that it's also paying attention to analyzing and labeling the subtle noises in the background, or pondering the route that the person speaking to me took to get there, or wondering what music they're listening to on their way, or whether I should bring up that seemingly unrelated thing that I'm pretty sure they're going to be excited to hear, or any number of things that randomly pop up as potential priorities that it wants to pay attention to. One of my favorite things I've heard shared about ADHD is that it's been around for ages. And in fact, we were sometimes the canaries in the coal mine that helped people know that there was actually literally a saber-toothed tiger over there because we paid attention to the rustling of the leaves first. So I kind of like that one to round this one out. But basically, this is why those things that work with me, this is why the people that work with me know me to be a proficient note taker. I have to do it. If you don't notice me taking notes in a meeting, I'm not going to be great at remembering the contents of that meeting later. And a spoiler alert, I am almost always taking notes. If you need someone to take some good notes, people tap me on the shoulder for it. And yes, it does make personal life a little harder. Notebooks and laptops aren't so great to use over a romantic dinner with your partner.
Next meme, and I'm keen to hear what you all think of it. Sensory issues. They can also be really challenging, especially for autistic folk. Some might have sensitivities to one or more of a whole range of things, including sight, sounds, smells, taste, and touch. These aren't things that can be cured, but they definitely can be accommodated or allowed for in the workplace. Now, of course, allowing someone to work from home is a huge benefit, but sometimes that's not possible. At Portable, we have the flexibility to work from home up to 4 days a week, which I personally really appreciate. But for those office days, we do have a bunch of small meeting rooms that I can hide away in if I'm feeling particularly overwhelmed from noise and movement around me. And there's also chairs and couches that are out in the open but tucked away in a corner, which can sometimes be a really great place to work as well. Otherwise, noise cancelling headphones are an excellent option, so long as colleagues are respectful of them and understand why they might be in use. For me personally, I'm okay with the noise of people talking around me and I can generally tune it out. But what I really struggle with is the sound of somebody chewing or breathing loudly. Now, I'm very aware this is a me thing, and so my headphones are my best friends. And I've been fortunate enough to have good relationships with colleagues in the past who'll let me know if they plan on eating something crunchy like an apple or some nuts, so that I can put my headphones on in advance and let them snack in peace. Lighting is another thing to consider in the workplace, although it isn't always something that you can quickly or easily adjust or improve. Some people might find it really challenging to work in places full of fluorescent lights, so being aware of this and helping them to find somewhere that's a little bit less bright can be really appreciated. Once again, though, it goes back to the idea of asking somebody what might work best for them, rather than assuming that what works for neurotypical people will work for them.
Next, we've got the always wonderful Brittany Broski. What an amazing meme. Hyperfocus can set unattainable standards. It might sound amazing, but in reality, it's a double-edged sword. We might be able to get into flow state and work for hours and hours, getting incredible amounts of work done, but we're also still just human. Humans, surprisingly enough, need to take bathroom breaks, lunch breaks, and generally look after themselves. This is near impossible when you're in hyperfocus. Another problem is the unintended pressure that we place on others through the huge amount of work that we get done while we're in hyperfocus. Know that just because we've done it doesn't mean that you have to as well.
Finally, masking is a very real thing. Just as the name it suggests, it essentially means putting on a face or an act to survive and blend into a neurotypical world. Instead of embracing themselves and their unique abilities, neurodivergent people will often hide who they really are so that they can fit in. For me, learning more about autism made me realize that I'm a completely different person when I'm at home, in my own space, compared to when I'm at work or seeing friends or just in a place that I'm not comfortable with. I had always told myself that I was actually just really adaptable and I could make myself fit into a situation, even if it meant pretending to be someone else entirely. But I realize now in hindsight that it was just masking. Now, not only is this a pretty miserable feeling for a person to feel like they have to hide their true selves, it's also really exhausting. I can't tell you the amount of times I've come home from somewhere and been utterly exhausted and drained and needed to go to bed for a nap. For a long time, I put this down to simply being an introvert, getting my energy from recharging within myself. But in recent years, I've realized that it's more than that. I'm physically tired, sometimes for days, and I often need space to let myself go back to being me. It's actually been one of the silver linings of COVID and ongoing lockdowns, if I'm allowed to say that, being able to work from home where I can be myself and get my work done. It means it's a fantastic way for me to check back in with myself and learn more about who I really am.
Thanks, Caitlin. I just wanted to pause for a second and notice that the chat is full of a lot of people relating to the points we've shared just now, and some interesting observations even from people that we've come across in our past as well. Just pick up on one there about not having known to be able to share a shared diagnosis of neurodivergence before coming to a conversation. That one resonates with me entirely. I think one of the things that we often talk about, the three of us, is the renewed sense of knowing yourself better when you get these diagnoses. And I think that's an important part of this too. So I just wanted to reflect, we hear you, we see what you're saying in the chat there as well. So let's come back to where we all started together and revisit again why we might think neurodiversity matters. Now, gold stars all round for your first responses to this anyway, but we're going to just bring you back to the start and see if you've had a chance to reflect on anything that might have changed, anything that might have updated, anything that might have added to your understanding already of why you think neurodiversity matters. So we're going to bring you back to Slido and see if you've had any updated understanding of why you think neurodiversity matters. It may be possible too on this slide that we actually won't see a lot of change based on how strong the first responses were.
It was amazing, and it's really reassuring, and I guess reassuring is the best word for it. It's awesome to see.
Absolutely. I'd invite you too, if there's something you've learned for the first time today, feel free to add it into the mix there too. Something that kind of was a bit of a realization moment, that you hadn't attached to these concepts necessarily before.
I just saw the one about making neurodivergence my hyperfocus, and that is so true. When it sort of first crossed my radar, I couldn't tell you how long I spent researching.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The hours and hours of videos and articles and anything I could consume was immediately gobbled up.
And memes. Memes are a great way to learn.
Yeah. I tell you what is worth it is connecting with other folks in your workplace who have the shared experience. You know, Caitlin, Ellie, and I, we catch up, and you don't have to feel as much the need to necessarily hyper focus on the content. We've got other amazing people in your world to also round out your perspectives and share your learnings and lessons with as well. Yeah.
I'd like to shout out to the person who has learned that they would have been a good early warning system for a saber-toothed tiger. I've learned that today too. So.
They weren't always saber-toothed tigers, by the way. They probably got sick of us rustling leaves and getting scared of every single one of them. But hey, it would have paid off. All right. Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much for being really generous with some of the disclosures here too. This is a safe space, and we really appreciate you rounding out the conversation, not just for us, but for others on the call as well. Okay, so we want to talk about some opportunities. We want to round this out with leaving you with some things to take away with you today. Now, full disclosure, we may not get all the way through to 2 p.m, and that's totally okay as well, but we'll see what the Q&A brings us towards the end. So alongside those superpowers we've shared with you today, and the efforts to create the conditions for these that might be necessary, we wanted to point out the opportunities for business in a very general sense. feels like we're preaching to a converted crowd a little in the room, but there's probably some people that also wanted to know a little bit about what the opportunities are around having neurodivergent folks at the table. And I'm passionate about this on a few levels. One of them is that inclusive design doesn't exist just as some token thing. You actually make better things. And so these points are all around that. So innovation, let's talk about that for a sec. It's a key ingredient in policy reform and in creating transformational change. And if you don't know Portable that much yet, that is key to what we do here. So having teams that can look at problems from different perspectives can make for more creative problem solving, and it creates the conditions for innovation to thrive. This helps you build better designed products and services. And studies have shown teams with neurodiverse staff have a better chance at holding a wider and deeper perspective, which again can translate into better designed products and services. And neurodivergent people often find it easier to empathize with and accept other human differences because they're accepting of their own, which means they are often the first to join and support efforts across all forms of diversity, neurological or otherwise, which in turn can bring voices to the table that will help you build better designed products and services. So I hope that point drilled it home a bit for you. It's about building better things.
With all this talk about why neurodiversity matters and the opportunities that exist, we better leave you with some tips, tricks, and principles to move forward with. So tip number 1 is all about providing multiple mediums. When we share information, we're usually only using one medium, a Zoom call, a Slack message, an email, whatever it may be. To improve this, we can make it more accessible. We should make sure that there's always at least 2 mediums. Maybe write down what you talked about in the Zoom call, or send a quick recording explaining that document that you just shared, or use a Miro to map out and help explain what you mentioned in a Slack message. We all have our own preferences when it comes to mediums, so communicate with the others so that you know what works best for them. And now for time flexibility when it comes to decisions. We're great at making hot decisions at urgent moments, like in an emergency. We aren't as good at making cold decisions because they're not as urgent. They leave us with more time, though this extra time can lead to decision paralysis, where we overthink ourselves to a standstill. Considering we aren't usually in an emergency situation, we need to have other techniques to activate hot decision mode. One way of doing this is to give a set amount of time for the decision. This way, we have to make the decision and we have time to make the decision and we're not overwhelmed by being put on the spot, but we're also not given too much time to overthink it. As well as giving us time to make the initial decision, we also should have time and space to change or add to that decision. Communicating in clear language. Portable in particular is pretty great at this already, writing in clear language that's easy to understand and has no jargon. But in general, speaking and writing in a clear way can be beneficial for neurodivergent people. It's very easy for ambiguity to lead to a lot of stress and confusion and decision paralysis. Some neurodiverse people aren't great with sarcasm either, may not pick up on it. They may well take it literally and not understand the humor behind it. This is where my point about multiple mediums can be really helpful. Following up a conversation with notes or key items can help reduce the ambiguity and confusion because a person can simply refer back to the instructions or notes rather than analyzing and overanalyzing what the other person meant when they said something. A lot of neurodivergent people like to have clear expectations of what's coming and what is expected of them in situations like meetings or events. Where possible, it's really helpful to provide context and clear information about what a meeting might look like, what is to be discussed, and whether there's any preparation required. This is useful for everyone, to be honest. We all like knowing what a meeting is going to be about, but in particular, a neurodivergent person might like to spend some time preparing mentally for a meeting or an event, and knowing what's to come will really help with that. Be open to people who don't think like you do. It's okay to think differently, but it's also a great opportunity to learn from others. Here at Portable, we have a whole bunch of Slack channels for different social topics to share opinions and ideas, but we've specifically set one up relating to neurodiversity. It's a safe place for our team to share information, ask questions, and discuss different ideas and topics. Everyone that's neurodivergent presents differently and experiences it differently. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach. So having a place to discuss that's really important. We can talk about our own lived experiences together. And finally, be respectful of the nuances behind terms and don't use them flippantly. You're not OCD for organizing things. You're not autistic for sticking to a daily routine. You're not ADHD for daydreaming. These are complex conditions and have a broad range of symptoms and traits that may overlap. Using terms in flippant, generalizing statements can be inaccurate or harmful to those around us.
To wrap up, in true Portable tradition, here's a reminder of some of the principles we've touched on today and how you can take them into your work lives when you leave us. As I mentioned earlier, every individual should be allowed the space and the agency around how they identify with, talk about, and manage their relationship and lived experiences. To use my colour wheel analogy again, everyone is their own individual hex code. Two people might look to be the same shade of pink, but in fact, they're very different. Ask questions and be curious. Rather than expecting someone to change who they are to fit the world, consider how the world might be able to adjust to suit them. The unintended consequences of that is that it actually might well end up helping more people than you realise. Consider the accommodations we make to improve spaces for those in a wheelchair or using other mobility aids. Although ramps, elevators and handrails were originally designed for physical disabilities, they also help those pushing a pram, or those who might have just had a big leg day at the gym, or simply those people who just don't like walking upstairs. And finally, diversity is like the seasoning you add to a special meal. It's essential to create a better outcome, and without it, it would simply be bland, tasteless, and limited.
With a spice.
Awesome. Hey, Ellie and Caitlin, that was fantastic. Thank you. And we're going to now, friends, jump into some of the Q&A. So we're going to open the magic Q&A box and see what's in there. We've got 3 in here at the moment. A few more coming through as well. I guess we'll start from the top if that works. I'll host the questions and we'll respond to them. And again, full disclosure, we're talking from lived experience, not from an elevated expertise or anything that might come from being a professional in these spaces. Someone has said, I'd love to hear if you have any suggestions how we could apply flexibility in decision-making or other principles in collaborative experiences like design thinking workshops with teams or clients. Oh, that's a great one. I've got an early answer for it, but Ellie or Caitlin, anything popping up for you about suggestions for applying flexibility in decision-making, especially in the context of workshops?
This is all yours, Adam.
Cool. So there's a few things that we can do here. One is to not try and always go for the grand reveal, I think, when it comes to how we do our work as designers and strategists. And we do love to do the thing where we share something at the end and it's a big moment for everyone. You can preempt some of these decision moments and be fair to the people who might attend by letting them know what sort of decisions you might be expecting, whether that's just about the type of decision or the shape of the decision that might be discussed on the day, or does it necessarily have to conclude with the finalization of the workshop? Can there be an open other means to continue to feed into that decision making, that voting that you've set up in a virtual space? There's also a really great framework I've come across recently that I talked to about with the people I manage at work called a decision tree. Sometimes decisions feel very black and white and that they're to be made solo. If you've ever found the decision tree framework, give it a Google. It talks about different layers of decision making and who needs to be involved in each layer of decision. And it adds that extra nuance to decision making. You've got decisions that are more fundamental to everything where shared decision making and shared agreement is really important. And then that goes right through to easy to make decisions that people should feel empowered to make by themselves and go and have agency to act upon. So that's hopefully answered some of that question for you. Feel free to follow up if there's any extra ones.
Hey, Adam, before you jump on, I think we've got a few people asking questions in Slido. So if we can
Cool.
just get you to put your questions in the Zoom Q&A, and that way we can see them all and make sure we get to everybody.
Yeah, great. We are working from the Zoom Q&A primarily at the moment, friends. Okay, and then we have Amanda has asked, how do we begin discussing neurodiversity in a workplace that has never looked into this or may not have a want for this? Any thoughts, friends?
I think not to toot our own horns, but I think this webinar might actually be a really great way to start. You could share the recording of this and the resources that we've got as well, and perhaps share it generally and get people to at least be open to the idea. It may not necessarily solve everything, but it might at least start the conversation and then go from there. I think, you know, Portable is a fantastic company in the sense that it was already quite open to this kind of thing, but Adam, Ellie and I have really kind of championed it, I think, and really pushed to grow this movement as well. And I think sometimes you do have to step up and be that champion to, you know, advocate and push a little bit more. So this webinar might be a really great way to help with that.
Yeah, and I think that's some good points there, Caitlin. And I'd add to that power dynamics are often at play here, and I want to acknowledge that too. But neurodiversity is not that rare. You may well be working in a workplace where people in leadership positions actually either have a diagnosis of neurodivergent conditions or have people that they have in their family with those conditions too. And so I think seeking out the allies is an important part of this, so you don't have to feel like you're having to do it alone. I think that's also a really important part of the puzzle too. And yes, kudos, Ellie and Caitlin, for really leading the charge in this space with us. I think it's amazing to have these conversations so openly.
Yeah, I think having allies, reaching out to other people, if you can get anyone on board, it definitely makes it easier than charging ahead by yourself.
Yeah. We've also relied on, and we're going to share at the end before we wrap up, a number of articles published by universities, published by people who have high esteem, that are talking about the benefits, the value of neurodiversity in a workplace. So it is a challenge. It's hard to do, but it's important to talk about the opportunities that are being missed by having blind spots around neurodiversity as well. So thanks for that question as well. Someone's asked, what do Portable do? We won't spend a heap of time talking about it in the webinar, but you can go to our website, portable.com.au, especially portable.com.au/work. You'll see a lot of what we do. But basically, we're here to address social need and policy failure with research, design, and technology in the world. And that allows us to work with all sorts of very cool organizations doing very meaningful work. The next question from, I think I'm going the right way through the questions. Yes, it is the earliest one. Danica, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Is there a time you forced yourself to fit the typical mold at work and later regretted it? And how has that affected how comfortable you feel expressing your needs now? What a marvelous question.
I'd jump in and say, absolutely. I think every job I've had up until Portable, I have forced myself to fit that typical mold. And it's so refreshing now to not feel like I need to act a certain way or be a certain way. I don't know if it's regret so much as just sort of being forced or feeling like there's that pressure to. But yeah, I absolutely didn't feel as comfortable. Whereas now, you know, I feel like I can go to work and bring my whole self to work, not just the skills or experience that I have.
I think also another thing is even not related to say forcing yourself into a typical mold, but I think it's fairly common among neurodivergent people, but even knowing how to express what your needs are and or know what your needs are is also a point of trickiness.
I always love when you see job applications that say, you know, is there anything we can do to help you with your application? Do you require extra assistance? And it's sort of a case of yes, but I don't know what the answer is, you know. Even after we did, so for context, we did a presentation internally about neurodiversity. And afterwards, there was a few things from people saying, what can we do to to help. And I think we all sort of went, not sure. You know, sometimes it's really hard to identify what it is we need until we need it. So yeah, that can be challenging too.
Yeah, such a great question. I'm going to try again and say, sorry, Danica, maybe that was the correct pronunciation. Yeah, I think we miss out when we do force ourselves into a typical mold, because it's about knowing yourself better, which then allows you to help other people know you better. So something that might be dismissed as, you know, I've had a tendency in the past to be very excitable in things I really care about, and that forces me to talk a bit earlier than I should because I want to raise a point. And I've had to work a lot on that, but I've worked on that because of the diagnosis giving me that better understanding about myself as well. So I think that's what can be missed there too. Emma's asked, friends, can you direct me in the direction of any language framing work that's been done? And I'm not sure, Emma, if you're meaning appropriate language in these conversations. Feel free to have a look at our resources that we share at the end. Hopefully that'll help you with that. But outside of that, I don't know where else we might be able to direct you to on that one. Let's see how we go with those resources, but feel free to follow up with us. There's a contact slide that we'll finish on today as well. Erica has asked, what is the most respectful way to ask if someone is doing okay in the context of autism and neurodiversity in general? On the flip side, what's the best way to provide space?
I might jump in if this is okay. I actually attended last week a mental health first aid course over 2 days, which if anyone is interested, I definitely recommend doing. I found it really helpful and valuable. But one of the things, one of the principles that came out of that I think applies really nicely to neurodivergence is the concept of asking people and giving them choice in what you might be doing. So, you know, particularly somebody in a mental health crisis relating to depression or anxiety, the advice was giving them the options of the different support that they could access rather than telling them what to do. So don't tell somebody to do X, Y, Z, ask them what you could do to help them instead. So I think, you know, respect, Erica, is the great kind of word you've used there, that it's very much about asking them, you know, are you doing okay? Is there something I can help you with? And kind of going in gently. They might not know what's happening in their world and what might be going on to cause them some stress, or they might be very aware, but they're just not sure yet how to manage it. So I think the principle we shared the whole way through was just about asking and, yeah, going in gently and seeing what they say. In terms of providing space, Ellie or Adam, did you want to take that one?
I think it's very specific to like what the situation is. Maybe someone's getting sensory overloaded and they need, say it's specifically sound sensory overload and they need some noise cancelling headphones, or they're getting overloaded from like being tired and they need some time to just rest, or like it's a very broad range of things, but also like very like general experiences. Like if you're tired, what do? You need to rest. Like thinking about it, it's not how am I trying to word it? It's not necessarily neurodivergent specific. Like there's a lot of things that we all like, the things that are causing it may be neurodivergent specific, but then the ways that we can help aren't necessarily. If you need to have a lie down, if you need some headphones, if you need to get outside because you don't want to be stuck inside, or the lighting's bad, or like there's such a broad range of things.
Yeah, and I think maybe Madison's added to the chat there too. It's okay to ask people in the right, respectful conversations. I think one thing you would have taken as well, Caitlin, from the mental health first aid, which I've also done, is it's actually less taboo to just talk to people. There's very few topics, if you've got a respectful relationship, that are actually off limits when it comes to coming from an intention of care. If your intention's good, generally speaking, people are forgiving of any lapses you make in language or anything like that. So I'd say trust in that too. We've got some interesting questions that compare together, because one's in the chat and one's in the Q&A. So Karen has asked in the Q&A, are you considered neurodivergent if you unexpectedly recover from an accident that caused severe brain trauma? And that pairs well with Joe's question in the chat. How do you know if you're neurodivergent or just relate to some traits? So I guess one thing I'd start with for Karen, that I saw that question earlier, and I think Karen, there's a balance here in that the terminology is flexible and quite flexible, and that pairs well with the commentary we had around allowing people to identify with what makes sense for them. So if any of the definitions you come across around neurodivergence are relatable to your experience, then that might be something that opens up some learning for you as a pathway to understanding yourself better, or the person that you might be talking about in that question. But secondly, I think diagnoses are important because they allow you to get clarity on what elements of neurodivergence you might be experiencing, or how it's showing up for you as well. I know mine's only been a recent diagnosis, and it was one that required a few assessments, some cross-checking with people that knew me from the psychiatrist, trialing of the use of medication to see if it was impactful for what I had. So I think taking it seriously, I guess, is the overarching point I'd add there. Ellie or Caitlin, did you have any thoughts on that question, or those two questions together?
Yeah, I think it also kind of similar to in the sense of thinking about disability and how like disability can range in the temporal sense in time. Like you may be someone who is permanently disabled, say in your legs. Maybe you have a disability relating to your legs, and there's also a disability of if someone's say broken their leg and they can't use their leg for a set maybe period of time, or maybe you've got weird pants on and you can't really walk properly in those pants. Like it's all a different kind of range, not to say that any of these are the same kind of levels, but like different kind of range of affecting things, and over time as well. It's kind of similar in that regard. But yeah, I think the main thing, like Adam said, is to research and look and understand and think about yourself and where you're at.
Thanks, Ellie. It was a really great point to talk about the dimensions, temporal dimensions of disability. I've put a reference in the chat there. Microsoft has a really great guide to inclusive design, and what Ellie's referencing there is central to it. So we got quite a few more questions here, but I think we'll have time for all of them. So let's just keep working one by one. I might ask for more clarity on this one. Would you have any suggestions for supporting frontline casual teams? But what I think I want to know about that question is if you're referring to frontline and casual teams who may themselves be interacting with neurodivergent folks, or is the question that those people who are acting on the frontline and casual teams may themselves have experiences of neurodivergence? So I think, the answer might be both, but I'd like to know a little bit more about that question if I could. The next question, the grand old question about recruitment. As a design strategist, I am very familiar with what we love to call our favorite challenge, recruiting people for research. It's never that easy. So as a research practitioner, how do I ensure I recruit neurodivergent individuals to get their perspective, especially if they are undiagnosed? That second part's a doozy. So to the first part, I think if you've got great relationships with the community organizations or the client who may have themselves really great networks for not only reaching people to engage in the research, but knowing them well, that can be a really great leg up into recruitment. If someone already knows how to advocate for the people at the table and knows enough about them, that's a really great way to start filling your database of potential participants in your research. But don't discount that there are experts in recruitment out there in the world, and they're getting better and better all the time at having dimensions of intersectionality present in how they're recruiting people as well. So some of the ones that we work with are easily Googleable out there if you're looking for recruitment panel providers, and they'll generally be pretty popular in the search results. When it comes to undiagnosed persons, I think you can still get there in some ways through clever screening questions, but my very first recommendation on that would be work with a professional to get the questions right. So, and also disclosure is really important here. You don't want to be trying to find people who might be neurodivergent who then have to find out that they may fit a diagnosis because they've come through your screening. Maybe it's not about the labels and the categories, and maybe you're just looking for a diverse perspective, in which case screening questions can do a great job as long as you're not too eager to label people at the end and you're simply looking for a divergence or diversity of perspectives. I think that can be important as well.
I've got one that I've just seen in chat from Shuyen. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Another really important point that they've raised is like self-diagnosis is valid. As I mentioned at the beginning of the slideshow, I am diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm not officially formally diagnosed as autistic. I've researched and done all of that stuff to understand that I fit pretty much all the criteria. So I know that I am autistic, but also it's expensive, as Shuyan mentioned. And the DSM, which is, can't remember the exact, do you guys remember the names that the acronym is?
Diagnostic something manual, standards manual?
Essentially, it's not perfect. It's kind of outdated. And a lot of things that kind of neurodivergent communities, specifically autistic and a lot of other ones, have symptoms that they recognize as related to these conditions that aren't mentioned in the DSM. So these kind of, there's many factors that kind of surround this area of diagnosis and stuff. And if it's not something that you want or need, then you don't necessarily have to. Just to go into my own self for a moment, like I got diagnosed formally for my ADHD because I knew that ADHD, you could get medication, and to get medication, you have to be diagnosed. So that was why I did that. But then when I found out and kind of discovered that I was autistic, I didn't want or need personally to go and get a diagnosis because there's not medication, there's not something like that. And it's a lot of money. It's fair enough. Yeah.
There's a few conversations in the chat as well about labels, whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing or what it might achieve. And I think, again, it comes back to the individual. For some people, they don't need that label. You know, they're comfortable and they're confident in who they are, and whether they've paid thousands of dollars to get that label or not, they're fine. Other people, though, might feel that official label, and I hate the word label, but, you know, other people might feel that sort of formality will help them to advocate for themselves, to get treatments or to, you know, talk to their workplace about it. So really it comes down to the individual and what you feel you might need. If you're really comfortable with, you know, not being formally diagnosed, but you know full well you fit that criteria, then great. At the end of the day, it doesn't change who you are as the person. You're still displaying those traits and you're still neurodivergent in yourself. So whether or not there's a formal label on that doesn't actually matter. It still is what it is, and you are who you are. So
yeah, great points, everyone. And thanks for raising that as well, Shuyen. For my personal experience myself, just to add on to Ali's sharing there as well, receiving an ADHD diagnosis gave me a home for some of the comorbidities that I've experienced in my life. Or not a home, home might be a clumsy word, but a way through which to understand those comorbidities. So I've had anxiety, I've had depression in my life, and not always necessarily paired with my ADHD, but it certainly helped me understand some of the reasoning behind why I might have experienced those things in certain times and how those things intersect with each other. So, you know, there's, like Caitlin said, it is very individual. It's based on what you feel you need. And no one's here to judge you for the choice you make. It's entirely individual.
It's the case with so many things in this area of neurodivergence. It's like, it's very individual. Everything is like, me and Adam both have ADHD, but we may have very varied experiences, or we may have very similar experiences, and we may want to do different things for different reasons. And it's all you, baby.
We needed that on a slide, Ellie. A few more in the Q&A, and then we'll see how we've still got time, so this is great. So Tanya said, I'm creating a workplace passport for new and existing employees for what they require to make work possible or easier. It's voluntary and shared to who the individual wants to be aware of their disability. Have you got something similar or any ideas of what you would like? Thinking of a big corporate employer. It's a great initiative.
Awesome.
Mm.
I would love to jump in and say we don't really have anything formal like that at Portable. There's definitely conversations, and I think everyone is pretty comfortable in sharing what they might need. But I think thinking back on previous jobs, the biggest reason I might not have shared anything is that fear of what the consequences could be. And I know that in a perfect world, there would be no consequences, but it's very, particularly when you have that anxiety underlying, it's very easy to worry then that, if I admit that I might need something, does that mean people will view me differently? Or maybe, I'll get fired. That's my favorite panic. So I think, no matter what you're doing, whatever you're creating, whether it's a passport or a guide, I think it's really, really important to look at how you're framing it, that, you're not going to be, I guess it's that encouragement that, somebody sharing, it's sharing because you want to help them, and it isn't going to impact them in any way. There won't be any kind of negative association. It's purely just, hey, we want to help you do better. We want, we know you're really great at this, but we want to help you be even better. I think that's really important because, and I imagine it's similar for people with physical disabilities. I obviously can't talk to that myself, but I imagine it's a similar thing where people are worried about asking for accommodations. But I think the biggest thing is that language around, making it safe so that people can ask for accommodations.
Yeah, great point, Caitlin.
I think
Kelly?
I had a point in my head. It's just I was gonna move on, do something. I may come back to me.
No worries. Some great stuff happening in the chat there too, friends. Proud of some of the things that people are doing here. They're taking the slideshow and adding it into the conversations in their workplace.
Shout out to Amanda, who's already done it. She's done it while we're chatting, so that's awesome.
Yeah, sorry, I've remembered my point. And I guess another thing is, if you're able to get past the anxiety of bringing it up, making it a topic that is talked about and getting it out there, if there is a negative reaction, obviously, hopefully not, but if there is, it's almost like, yay, now I know I can get out of there because I shouldn't be in a place like this, because this is not a safe and accepting or supportive environment to be in. And I also want to acknowledge that not everyone is in a position where they can just go, let me get out of this job and go to another one. But yeah, it can be kind of a way to detect and find out red flags about where you're at.
Yeah. In short, Tony, awesome stuff. Great initiative. I love Tim's question. I love the analogy of spices or ingredients in cooking, with the variety, complexity, and combinations that are harmonious and complementary or contrasting. What spice would each of you be?
Love this question so much.
Great one, Tim.
Any early thoughts?
I would say cinnamon, because it reminds me of Christmas, and Christmas is my favorite time of year. So that's an easy one for me.
Are we talking individual spices or like things that can be made from multiple spices, kind of?
Whatever you like, Ellie. Whatever you like.
It's up to the individual, Ellie.
Oh, I love sriracha. Love some spice. It's good. Any kind of chili, yeah.
I'm going to plug a local restaurant with mine. I'm Chotto Motto's crispy chili oil, because it adds some interest to any dish, and it's a bit surprising. Thanks for that question, Tim.
Awesome
Larry
question.
said, over 25 to 30 years, our work has shown that the human condition is the least understood operating system in the world. In school and at work, there's little to no real learning about what it is to be a human. How do you see that changing, especially given the very complex issues we face globally? My goodness, that's a good question. How do we see that changing, folks? Any early thoughts?
I love the operating system analogy. It's just like my mind has immediately gone to like some obscure operating system, like not so obscure like Linux, but then like even more obscure like FreeBSD or like Temple OS or something crazy out there. Everyone's like, yeah, no one knows what I'm talking about right now, but I just, love the analogy.
Hopefully we have some devs in here that appreciate it. I think there was Twitter thread that I shared actually recently in our neurodiversity channel on Slack, that was talking about the increase in diagnoses that are coming through in the last few years around neurodivergence. And I think COVID, and I don't have any stats to back this up, this is sort of anecdotal, but I think COVID has really helped to highlight how many people actually do have some form of neurodiversity going on, maybe formally diagnosed, maybe not. But I think the fact that we've been at home so much, particularly those in the southern states of Australia, we've been able to kind of let our true selves come out a bit. And I think it's then, highlighted who we really are, and it might have surfaced some of these traits that have then made us explore, what we think we might be. So I think, COVID is one of those things that it's been such a huge impact on the world. And as a result, all of these things that we might not have seen are coming through. And I'm hoping that means there'll be more work done to explore it a bit more. I think it's great that, people are so much more open to what neurodivergence could look like in people. It's, no longer ADHD, and it's no longer autism presenting in the way that it traditionally has in males. We're seeing a rise in females being diagnosed with both of those, because we're learning more about how we present so differently. And I think it's one of the reasons that it was never picked up for me as a child, because I was a female and I didn't present the way that males do. So I'm hoping that, we're learning and we're getting better. Whether or not that actually happens, or whether or not we learn, but we actually do anything about it, that's for another day. But I think, the last couple of years has kind of highlighted it a bit more.
Yeah, and I think maybe how I'd see an answer to your question too, Larry, is sometimes all the troublesome things can mask all the good things that happen as a result of the troublesome things. So, we're lucky enough to work in a workplace where mental health days, people take them no questions asked. We have a very active employee assistance program where we actively talk about people being able to access therapeutic support when they need it. We had, I think, over 100 people at one point in that participants list in this conversation today. And I'd like to think that's a pretty good sign that we're doing the work all together. Like, congratulations for being here and joining us in this convo. So I actually think it's sort of like this systems view thing that starts here and then it starts to work its way outwards. Systems are such complex things, but if we understand ourselves inside of systems, and then the eventual goal being is shift the paradigm, there's ways to do it, and I think these conversations are such an important part of that. Hope you're feeling like that too, everyone who's still on the call. Here's a good one. Any tips on how managers can support folks who are undiagnosed but need adjustments at work? How can I advocate for those team members when it comes to HR systems, etc.? Getting a diagnosis is such a prohibitively expensive process for many. It's a great question. I think of some of the points you were making, Ellie. Inclusive design benefits everyone. So if a system is causing challenges, or a platform or a way of working, a process is causing challenges for someone, even if they're not necessarily formally diagnosed with a neurodivergent condition, it's going to be causing problems for a lot of folks. And that's just someone showing a need that's actually the pointiest end of that need that other people are probably sharing too, which is kind of a core thing for inclusive design and why it works so well. So I'd be advocating for all as part of that conversation, I think. Imagine that time poor person who otherwise doesn't necessarily present with a lot of other barriers. Imagine how much easier it's going to be for them if you fix that thing. So I think that's where I'd probably personally come from. Don't know if you have anything to add to that, Caitlin or Ellie?
I think, sorry, Ellie, what Ellie was saying earlier, though, about, two forms of communication, having a Zoom call that's followed up by notes, that doesn't necessarily benefit just somebody with ADHD. It could benefit the parent that's, thinking of 1,000 things they've got to do for their kids afterwards, or it could benefit the person who's working to a deadline and they're listening to the meeting, but they're not quite focused because they're trying to get something out the door. It's something that can benefit everybody. So if you can bring that into practice and it becomes just natural, hey, we just had a meeting, here is the summary of the actions and the points that we did, great, everyone wins from that. If there's a Slack message and then it's followed up by a quick recording or video to say, hey, I just shared this document, here's the things I was talking about, just a quick summary of that. That benefits everybody. So if you can start from that inclusive point, then everyone wins.
Yeah. And you know what? It's incumbent on management to do the hard work. Some of that stuff takes more time. So be it. It's about what you prioritize too, I think. Yeah.
There's a great question in chat. I'm not just saying that because it's from my mum, but there's a great question in chat talking about adolescents that are neurodivergent in the stage of life where they really just want to blend in and merge with their peers. And yeah, what's the best way? How are things going to change? Hopefully, obviously, it'll be better when it's more commonly accepted, commonly talked about, and people are aware of it. But yeah, currently, I don't know. I personally, I don't think I have too much to talk to it myself, because like I wasn't diagnosed until after high school, and I know it's the same for you guys. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah. I would say I grew up in a high school environment where I was probably around folks who, for themselves, may have had diagnoses or otherwise, but were incredibly misunderstood people, and I feel really sad about that. And I actually think I think people can be better than sometimes we might assume they can be if they're given enough knowledge. I know that me and my classmates probably would have been a lot kinder to people that we didn't understand if we were given a vehicle for understanding. Because in the absence of that, of course, kids will be kids, and kids can be cruel. Kids can also be amazing, though, if they're given an avenue. So I think maybe that's how I'd look at that answer from my personal experience. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, I think that's
watch the kids do awesome stuff with it.
That's definitely it. I think there's definitely not enough awareness or knowledge or of that being taught or shared in general kind of high schooling kind of stage and area.
Yeah, and we're getting towards the end of the Q&A here as well, friends. But Larry's also asked, given your role in government policy, what do you see that you can do? Great question. Obviously, we talk about this a lot. One of the things I'd say is government's getting really good at this stuff. And it may not be at the pointy end where it's the service delivery end, but it's at the intention end that eventually changes the service delivery end, from my experience. So, for example, when we talk about doing design research on a government project these days, it's not about us having to advocate for diversity at the table in our recruitment or who we try and speak to anymore. The first question is, how are we going to get these voices at the table? So I think that's one important point. But I think also, Larry, it's worth us acknowledging that when I was talking about systemic change before, and anyone who's familiar in any sense with systems practice, there are levers you can pull that have varying degrees of impact, and sometimes admittedly those levers are around the edges. And when you get a chance to pull a lever, or at least even know that a lever's there that could really shift things for people, I think it's incumbent on us to advocate for that one to be focused on. Small things can build up to big things, but if you find a big thing, I think we've got to go for it. And that's something that we talk about a lot at Portable as well. And sometimes we're lucky enough to have those projects. I'm thinking of some that we're even working on at the moment. Thanks for the question. Did Ellie, Caitlin, anything more from you on that one?
Specifically.
Cool. Okay, someone's clarified about the question earlier about frontline casual teams and how we're supporting them who are neurodivergent themselves, considering that within their roles, they're often specific tasks, timelines, and not the level of flexibility that is sometimes found within a desk-based role. I guess it comes down to communication. It's where my mind was going halfway through reading that question. Caitlin or Ali, any thoughts?
One for the end, after you guys have responded.
Cool.
I think for me, looking back, I had casual roles as I was a bit younger in retail, and in hindsight, the benefit of hindsight, the way I was in those roles probably was very related to autism. I worked in apparel at Kmart, and the amount of time I would spend trying to get all of the clothes perfect, even though my manager was telling me to rush and get it done quickly, but I wanted it perfect. I can definitely understand there's challenges there. And I think, communication is right. Understanding what it is that person might need, or where they might be. Maybe they're not as fast, but why aren't they as fast? And then maybe you can look at the tasks that they're doing, and maybe you can be giving them more tasks that they would be excelling in, and perhaps the ones that they're not so great with, shifting them around a bit, just to give them that flexibility, so they're still contributing, they're still getting the work done, and the work is still being done, but it's the work that works best for them. I think that's an easy place to start.
Great response, Caitlin. I was going to say that hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder here, Ellie, but leaving ambiguity around what good looks like can be a really gnarly thing for at least my experience with neurodivergence, and also what's incumbent on me as a manager to do for other folks in the business. So it might be about the time being clear, and it might be about the extent of the things is also clear, but like the quality to which to do them at, and what you've got available to you, and what the expectation is. I think getting really clear on that can also be a really important thing. And then to the parts around how do you cater to different ways of doing the thing. Yeah, I think you're right. Communication, asking people what they need within those expectations to deliver well, can be a really good starting point for that convo. Did I steal any of your thunder there, Ellie?
No.
Good.
Mine, yeah. Basically, mine's not such a productive response. It's more of a, grr, this sucks. It's like yeah, shit conditions and time pressure. Capitalism, baby. Like yeah. It's like those kind of roles. It's not great. It doesn't account for neurodiverse people. It doesn't account for people who are disabled. It doesn't account for a whole range of things. And yeah, that's capitalism. I won't go into it too much. Anyway, moving on.
Kind of ties nicely with Larry's point around systems change. There are possibly justifications for people being in roles that allow them to use the superpowers of their condition. And again, I don't use superpowers flippantly. I've said that in other forums before. I think there are real benefits that people bring to the table, and having the space to use those traits to their full extent is a good one. Danica said overthrowing capitalism could be the next webinar. We might have to see how we go on that one. So I wanted to acknowledge as well, thank you to the person who has shared a little bit more about their story there in the Q&A. I won't read it out in particular, but I did just want to acknowledge that experience that you're talking about there, and that it's true that not always you're met with full understanding, respect, or the softness that you deserve in a situation. And I'm sorry for that experience. What I wanted to do is make a quick bit of space here at the end to talk about some places that you might be able to go for more information. We're wary and we're aware that just giving people links isn't a great way to say, hey, here's where you can get some support. I think there's been some really great conversation in the chat about the utility of even just checking in with your GP and talking to them about what's going on, and maybe seeing what avenues open up that way. There are other things that you can do as well. I think my colleagues are going to post some information into the chat here just to give you some of the links that we've relied upon and shared today with you. So I'll see that pop up in the chat. But again, I wanted to reiterate, and Ellie and Caitlin, I'll let you sign off as well. I just wanted to reiterate a thanks to you, Ellie and Caitlin, for this conversation. And a thanks to you all for being here with us and sharing so honestly and openly, and in a way that was quite robust too. You met with the challenge that we asked for. It was to integrate, it was to challenge and question things that you were hearing. I loved some of the corrections on some of the thoughts, because we're in a public facing forum and we're doing the best with what's coming to us at the time. But I think overall it was a really respectful conversation. So I just wanted to say thank you here at the end. And offer you some time and space, Caitlin and Ellie, for the same.
Yeah, thank you also to you, Caitlin, to you, Adam. It's been great. And also to behind the scenes, thank you, Madison. And yeah, to everyone in chat for the vulnerability, for the insight, the curiosity. It's really, really awesome. Just great to see. It's great to see, like I think I said, yeah, I touched on earlier. It's great to see just like how much people care. And that's really what matters.
I haven't got much more to add, but I would say we've got our contact details for Portable showing on the screen there. But feel free, and I hope I'm okay to say this on behalf of Adam and Ellie as well, feel free to reach out to us individually on LinkedIn too, if you'd like. You might find that a more comfortable forum for asking questions or sharing stories. So I'm really open to that. And, you know, obviously we're not experts, but we can definitely help from a lived experience perspective. Yeah, there was, I think, one question too about whether we'd do another webinar. I think it might well be an option later in the year. We can touch on this again for people that couldn't make it today. But yeah, feel free to share suggestions of content or topics that you would like us to touch on. And yes, Tom Nook in the background. He makes a regular appearance on my background for Zoom. So thank you so much, everyone.